Welcome back to Unlabeled and Limitless. I'm your host, Lois Bainham, and I'm joined again by my co host, Faye Harrison. This episode is the final part of our 4 part conversation exploring attachment across the lifespan. Throughout this series, we've talked about safety, belonging, emotional memory, and the ways our experiences shape how we relate to ourselves and to others. In this episode, we reflect on some of the deeper questions that come up when we begin to understand our own patterns. From rejection sensitivity and emotional responses to the cultural influences that shape how we view relationships, this conversation is about moving from shame toward understanding. Let's get into it.
A lot of those layers and build some of those boundaries. So I used to laugh at the fact that all Americans had therapists, but I kind of also get it now. Um, they're definitely more traumatized than we were as children growing up in the UK.
Yeah,
Um,
can
I,
imagine.
I don't think we had it that bad considering. Like these kids here are doing freaking active shooter drills and stuff. I can't even comprehend like going to school and having to learn what to do. I remember Dunblane, and then everybody was like, guns are bad, get rid of them. Nobody can have guns. And everybody went, yeah, no, we don't want to see children die. And that was the end of it. Like, I know bad shit happens, but yeah, the kids and the family trauma as well. The kids are definitely way more traumatized than we are by the time they get to their early 20s.
hmm
But again, another podcast for another day. We'll do a difference between American youth and British youth. Um, so, what was the kind of biggest takeaway that you had with it going back and looking at kind of how these, sorry, I'm just like pivoting back now, but going back and looking at these theories and how we looked at attachment and this moral development over time, um like, did you talk about theory of mind at all?
I did, yeah, I did mention it because I know that uh, they were looking at um, there were a lot of comparisons between chimpanzees and human beings, and they were looking into whether um, basically whether chimpanzees had any sort of like moral compass, and so yeah, like theory of mind. Um, is capacity to distinguish between our own and others' beliefs, emotions, and ambitions, I believe. And I know, I think it was Rudolf von Rohr, and there was like some others. I'll find the source, but yeah, when they did look into it with chimpanzees, they found signs of it. But I think with them, they're more protective of their immediate group and like who they're with, whereas like I think with human beings it sort of branches out. So like I guess for example, like if I if there's something I don't like about how a human being is being treated, it's not just going to be my family and friends. It's like that's how I feel in general across humanity. And I think that's what they were trying to say. The main difference was that obviously with them, it was very much like they could see it within their own group. But if they were mixed with like another group, or what do you even call them, tribe, they didn't really care. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think so not so much when I wrote it, but now obviously, um, I mean, there's a whole moral sense of justice thing. My goodness, I didn't realize how much of a thing it was until I got my diagnosis, and now I've just embraced it now. And there was there's actually like something that happened. Well, there's two things that have happened recently, but one I'm not going to mention because it's a bit too personal in terms of like other people involved. But the other one was really, really recent, and it was when I was in York over the weekend, and my friend and I went to see an Amdram production of Annie, and the dog they were using like really clearly was not trained to be on the stage.
Oh.
It was really unhappy, it was really distressed, it was showing really visible signs. I was incredibly uncomfortable watching it, and I flagged it like in the interval, and they said, oh, you know, we're looking into it, blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, well, I hope you are, because if you don't, I will be. And they kind of said, oh, you know, if it comes back on in the second half and it still looks that way, like we'll sort something out. Obviously it did, obviously the same happened, and I took it into my own hands, and because I didn't trust that they were actually going to take it seriously, so I spoke to RSPCA, I spoke to local council, I did everything I could to make sure that dog was not going to get back on that stage. And my friend who I was with was a bit like, oh, you know, like I'm upset about it as well, but I just don't really want to make a scene. And I was like, well, that's fine, you stay out. I'm going to make a scene, because you know what? If there weren't people like us who stood up for things and people when there was injustice, nothing would get done, and abuse and cruelty and things like that would continue to happen. And you know what? The RSPCA, in their final email to me, were like, we're really grateful for people like you, because we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do without members of the public who care enough to flag things. So yeah, and it's something that I used to feel kind of, I wouldn't even say ashamed of, but people would make me feel like I was overreacting, or that, like, you know, oh, just leave it, just drop it. And now I'm like, actually, I'm proud to be like that. It's actually a really good quality to have, to care enough about things to actually want to make a difference. But yeah, so there's that. And then there's also the fact that, so I know with me, there's been a lot of times where I've probably misunderstood a situation or misconstrued something that someone said, or like how, like someone's intentions towards me, and probably vice versa. And I think factoring those in has probably also made a difference in terms of what, yeah, like my development and the opinions I have, and the experiences that I've had and the effects that they've also had. But I guess like the fact that I'm now aware of that is really good, because I can look back and go, ah, so when this happened, it actually was this, or this is why this made me feel like this, or yeah.
So, I mean, retrospect and having a lens that you can look through, and I know I've mentioned this. I mentioned this in the article that I was featured in, that I totally lost my thought there. Oh, that was it. Sorry. So those, like, as we have a label, right? We talk about labels, and having that diagnosis of ASD or ADHD or dyslexia or whatever is more of a lens for us to be able to see ourselves through and look back and kind of say, ah, okay, I tell myself this thing because of these experiences, but now I can go back to that moment and understand it wasn't me, it was them, the environment, the system, the whatever, not putting fault on people. Like, you know, if somebody didn't know, they didn't know. If they didn't understand, they didn't understand. But it wasn't you. It was a lack of understanding in this kind of space in between, right? And we do kind of build these strong identities because of those interactions. So then to have this label, for us to put a lens on ourselves and then go back, kind of makes you then start questioning some of that identity as well, right? Like, oh, did I really like that? Or was that just a hyper focus? Or did I really feel that way? Or was that just like my hormones raging and my dopamine out of whack? And that can be difficult too, because some of those things that we've stuck our identity on, now we've got to go back and either forgive ourselves, forgive somebody else, and then like learn a new part of ourselves to not replace that, right? Because it's still a part of you and you're learning and things, but it's like, oh, what am I going to do now? I don't have to rage against that moment in time anymore, because now we all have understanding and forgiveness, or we've got a new a new language, right? Because I think that's within theory of mind, right? It's kind of like, it is that ability to be able to attribute mental states to other people, right? And to recognize consequences and fairness and things like that. And it's essentially like how we somewhat develop our empathy. And it's important for us to be able to understand that other people might think differently to us and be able to attribute things to those different beliefs. So within that, like, I really appreciate you kind of talking about that justice sensitivity, because we do develop, because we learn these rules as we grow, right? And because we don't necessarily feel like we belong or fit in, we try and do things to learn these rules better than everybody else. And then if I do everything exactly like this, then that means I'll be what I'm expected to be, etc., right? And it's really like, I don't know where I'm going with it now, but it's kind of I don't know. I think it's just like, it's nice to know that we can change and we have the ability to do so. But I wonder what your thoughts are on all of that mind dump I just did. Sorry.
I think no, it makes sense to me. I think and there is like so much in it, but I think like what I've taken from that is, yeah, like I think there's things that I think are inherently just part of us that are like always going to be there, and it's a case of working with them, not against them. So a personal example for me, limerence, which I recently found out about, very, very common, especially with ADHD. So for anyone who doesn't, any listener who doesn't know, limerence is basically essentially a hyperfixation on a person. So when you start kind of talking to a person and you have like these intense feelings towards them, and there is some link to attachment with it as well, but generally I think it's more to do with like the hyperfixation of like it's sort of the same as if you'd get hyperfixated on a hobby, like a new, it's just like a new thing and it's shiny and it's all this dopamine, and that unfortunately can, like anyone who's vulnerable to limerence, and I use the term vulnerable in a very like light-hearted way, but susceptible I guess is a better word. It's very easy to then like not see love bombing and things where other people who don't get infatuated are like, well, that's strange, and that can then obviously lead to quite difficult situations. But now I'm aware of it, I can spot it, And it's almost like, okay, I know my brain's going to do this and I'm prepared now. So it's like you're sort of going to war with the armor rather than just being thrown in like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to deal with this. And I think that's why, because a lot of people I see online and stuff, and I've had a few people ask me, like, if you've got to age 29, age 30 and not known that you had ADHD and autism, like, why did you want to find out? And I think for the main reason, like for me, and the main reason I see a lot of other people say is because it reduces shame. It's it's a reason to things. It makes us feel like we belong more, and less kind of, because as you mentioned at the start, we are we're social beings and we're wired for connection, and it does feel a bit like a threat when you don't fit in, and you feel kind of like rejected. um so it's nice to see other people almost like quote unquote normalize behaviors that you do that you've
Mm.
always misunderstood or felt ashamed of. So yeah, limerence being one. Okay, cool, I know my brain's going to do that when I start talking to someone, and instead of like trying to fight it, I notice it and I just let it be, and now I've noticed it gets less and less and less because of that. Whereas before I'd kind of like beat myself up for it. Like, why am I like, why do I like this person so much? I barely know them. Why am I getting excited when they message me, and then like feeling rubbish when they don't, and all this stuff. Then you learn about rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and you're like, great, another reason why I'm not broken and don't need to like
Mm-hmm.
beat myself up, like, oh, I shouldn't feel like this about this. Because there's a lot of I think the use of the word should is can be really dangerous. Like, oh, I should be doing this, or I shouldn't feel like this. And it's like, by whose terms, by whose standards?
Yeah.
Like, the fact is, um I mean, even I tagged you in a video earlier, and I know I mentioned this in the last podcast, and you can obviously tell I'm a big fan. But Alex Partridge has just released a new book about RSD, and obviously he's talking about that a massive reason why it develops is because we are susceptible to all those microaggressions and micro criticisms and obvious criticisms from so young, that we internalize it as fact, and then it's like it's just really painful every time something comes up that takes us back to that place, or it's like another, oh, see, you're too much, you're not good enough, you're this, that and the other. But again, I used to think I was just massively oversensitive, and now I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not the only one experiencing this, there's lots of us, and it feels like, oh, okay, it's not, it doesn't make it any easier, but it makes it like I'm not trying to fight it anymore. Like, I accept it, and yeah.
Yeah. And uh, uh, having the ability to be able to explain something to somebody without needing anything back from them. Like, like we had a situation yesterday in a meeting, and somebody was pointing out, oh, and this thing doesn't connect, and that thing isn't working, and then this thing, if you didn't know. And I was like, yes, it's not finished, it's gonna get done. And they're like, yeah, but you want us to tell you if we notice these things. And I'm like, yeah, I know, and I want to continue doing that, but every time you say that, it feels like I'm being hit by a bullet that's like, you failed, you're a failure because this thing didn't get finished, and that person checked it and it isn't done, so then you're a terrible human. And I was like, I know you're just checking it, and I know it isn't supposed to be done yet, but that's still what it is, right? And just being able to put that in words to somebody and say, yeah, I need to be able to be defensive because that's how it feels to me, but it's
It
totally
does.
okay because, yeah.
And it does feel like an attack, and people who don't experience it, I think do struggle to understand it, and I don't blame them. Like, it's like how can you understand something you've never experienced? And like, talking about it logically doesn't really make sense. Like, it's like, you know, I feel like you've just ripped my heart out of my chest because you've told me that you don't like something that, and it's, you know, it's like something that it doesn't even have to be like anything directly linked to me. It can just be like, oh, you know, like this could have been put this way, and I just hear that as your way wasn't good enough, or your way, do
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? All right. And it probably does come, it probably is like a trauma thing. Like, it probably is taking back to the first time you heard that when you were X age, where you kind of absorbed, oh, okay, like I can't do things like this person does, and that adult seems angry at me about it, or is telling me off for it, or telling me that it's wrong, so that means I'm wrong,
Yeah.
which is sad. But again, it's like awareness helps to deal with it and try and undo those false narratives, I think.
Yeah. And I think something else that gets missed a lot in these conversations is the cultural context. And by culture, it kind of spans every category that you think it can, right? There's culture on a national level. In America, there's culture on a state by state level, as there is in England, right? You got the counties and different kind of identities come along with that, as they do in a lot of countries, right? And that kind of development of attachment, the development of feeling that you belong somewhere, that you are a part of something, and all of those things aren't just about how your brain develops or how it works or how people interact with you on a daily basis, right? Because cognition is how you process your emotions as well. It's how you take care of yourself. I fell over and hit my head twice, and my psychiatrist was so pissed at me, A, because I didn't call him and tell him that I keep falling over, but also because he's like, you need to reduce your cognitive load immediately. Like, I'm taking you off your stimulants immediately for a week, and right? And he was just like, oh, cognitive load. And because I've studied cognitive loads, I was like, okay, I understand what he means about that, because right now I keep having panic attacks, and it's because all the wires are jammed up, and I've had 2 head injuries, right? So it's kind of, and what is that? Well, culturally, I'm built in a way that's like, carry on regardless, right? What's the British way? Keep calm and carry on. Oh, you just smashed your head, but are you dead? No, get up and go to work then. Is your arm is falling off? Do you have another arm? Go to work then, right? That's kind of like the British way. So our culture and how we're socialized as well also play a part in that, and those things aren't fixed, and they're not a linear process, and that gives me hope and confidence for a lot of people that have been late diagnosed or are seeking diagnosis at the moment, right? Because now that we're moving beyond these weird perspectives, which is Western educational institution, industrial something and developed nation, right? So it's essentially Western countries that most of these studies are done in. When we talk about the prisoner's dilemma and different things, it's essentially a bunch of like school kids, young adults in white working middle class areas, right, that took part in a lot of these foundational psychology studies. But as we've kind of broadened out into like some more culturally diverse studies, we've got the open format on the internet, right, where we can open source studies and things like that and add to them, add data to them, perform your own experiments, etc. It gives me hope for where our understanding about inclusion and attachment can actually go to, and that we can shift how we talk about attachment and not just like pop psychology it, but also change how we relate to attachment and belonging and things.
Yeah. Definitely.
I'm wondering, do you have any closing thoughts?
I think for me, like I've one of my special interests is actually attachment theory in terms of like so yeah, it has become like a social media very popular thing, but I look at good sources, so like psychologists, coaches, people who actually have done the research, know what they're talking about. But I have something again that's really helped me to understand is because I think the narrative that gets pushed kind of across social media is, oh, it's like from your childhood and then it's just sort of fixed, which actually is not true. But also, I don't think there's enough research into, because one of these coaches actually admitted he did not know enough about this, in how neurodivergence actually can impact attachment and how that can change as well with like understanding. So I think, and again I can find where I found this out, but there is a higher prominence of like those who have more of like an anxious attachment style within ADHD, and there's quite a prominence of like more avoidant styles with autism, and that one I think is actually got more research into it. But then actually if you look at sort of why that is, it's quite easy to understand why. So like with the RSD, for example, the rejection and like the fear of rejection, it's automatically going to make someone feel more anxious and kind of need a bit more reassurance and feel less secure welcoming someone into their life. And those who are autistic, like I know, and this isn't like generalizing, but I know especially I would say with guys, I've seen there's quite a correlation between, because they're happy with like their independence and like routines and things, they come off as maybe more like less, more avoidant, because they're less likely to want to adapt. But then I think that's a whole other thing in itself. Well, then is that an attachment style, or is that actually the way their brain is? And then someone like me who's both has a bit of both. So yeah, I feel like, I guess all that to say, like I think it's a lot more complex than we see pushed over social media, and I think it's really important to just remember that like nothing is fixed, and we can always learn and we can always adapt and we can always change things.
Absolutely.
So yeah, because I think people like to, I've seen a lot of people kind of going around trying to diagnose other people with attachment styles, it's like really you should just look at yourself and how you can
relate differently to yourself.
yeah
And I agree with you on that. I think that's one of the things that makes me giggle, is when I hear people using these psychological terms. And while I've read about attachment theory and some of the theories around attachment theory and things, it wasn't my special interest, right? So it makes me laugh when I see people that have never studied psychology or psychiatry or any kind of neurology or anything like that, talking about these things and going, oh yeah, they're so and so attachment. This is their attachment style, and it's because their parent did this thing to them, and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, well, that's just one parent. What was the other parent like? Oh, well, they got along really well with that parent, and they did this, this, and this, and this, right? Okay, so there was a balance of attachment styles there then. So is it because of their mother, or is it because of, right? And I do think mothers have probably received way too much shit over the centuries and generations for differences in their children, and it still happens today in societies that don't have access to the same level of medical information and research, etc., right, where they think, oh my god, my kid is possessed, when in actual fact maybe they have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or schizoaffective disorder or whatever, right? It could be like one of a million things. But if we're all out there just diagnosing, oh, that person's a narcissist, that's the biggest one. That person, like, all the time. So many narcissists. It's like, are you sure they're not autistic though? Like, and I joke about that because so many people with autism get misdiagnosed as being narcissistic, don't they? And
or avoidant
like having
personality
borderline
disorder. Yeah.
So oh, they're like this. Are you sure they're not just autistic? And then people go, stop diagnosing everybody. I'm like, yeah, exactly right. Stop diagnosing everybody. I'm not qualified to diagnose, but I do know enough to be able to maybe say, hey, in a few years' time with the right training, I can diagnose it, right? Because I know quite a lot about it. But yeah, it makes me giggle, the narcissistic personality disorders out there. And it's like, yeah, lots of people have narcissistic traits. It does not mean that they've got a personality disorder. Maybe they're just an asshole. That isn't a disorder, that's just a personality.
I love that.
Right. Yeah. Good times. All right, I think we'll call it to a close for today. Thank you so much for joining me, Faye. It's always fun chatting with you. And I don't know what we'll be talking about the next time we meet, but I cannot wait for the conversation.
Me too.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Unlabeled and Limitless.
Thank you for joining us in this 4-part conversation on attachment across the lifespan. Throughout this series, we've explored safety, belonging, emotional memory, and the ways our relationships shape how we understand ourselves. If something in these conversations resonated with you, we hope it encourages curiosity rather than judgment, both toward yourself and toward others. You can follow Unlabeled and Limitless on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, or join our Patreon and Discord communities where we continue these conversations together. Until next time.